Hello everyone, Zadex Squared here and welcome to Clan Krug. Today I want to show off a Severance Enclosure build that I've been running for a few weeks. While it is an incredibly strong exotic, it doesn't really get enough attention and no one seems to really be talking about it all that much. You can run it on any subclass, however Arc, Solar, and Void pair much better with it than Stasis, as all three have ways to empower your base melee. Taking a look at the exotic, it's got the ability Spheromatic Trigger. Powered melee final blows unleash a damaging explosion. Finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the radius and damage of the explosion. This makes it pair really well with all of the light subclasses, as all of them have different ways to empower your base melee, so that you can just run around punching things and causing massive explosions. On Arc you have Knockout. Critically wounding a target or breaking their shield infuses your melee attacks with Arc energy and increases your melee range and damage for a short time. This makes your base melee be treated as if it's empowered for stuff like Severance Enclosure and any other exotics that do similar things. Also on Arc you have Juggernaut, which gives you a massive overshield when you're running with full class energy. This makes you much tankier as you're running into melee fights. For fragments, I've chosen to go with Amplitude, Resistance, and Feedback, though some of the other fragments, such as Frequency and Volts, would also work very well with Severance Enclosure and this build. For mods on this build, I'm going with Striking Light, Powerful Friends, Taking Charge, Supercharged, and Stacks on Stacks. This makes it so that whenever I melee something with my empowered melee, it's going to drop an Orb of Power because of Spark of Amplitude, and then because of Striking Light, if I melee something again, it'll drop another Orb of Power for my allies. This will drop Orbs of Power all over the battlefield for my allies, enabling them to get their super really quick, and also helping them out on any of their builds. Moving over to Solar, while you have Roaring Flames up, your uncharged melee attack will deal solar damage and scorch targets. This also grants it the empower effects for things like Severance Enclosure. You can also run Hammers, which will give you a charged melee that you can just pick up to recharge it. Combined with Sol Invictus, you can run around creating sunspots everywhere, buffing up your melee damage, and just generally keeping yourself healthy with the amount of healing that you can get. You can also combine this with fragments that increase the number of scorch attacks that you apply to targets, and also make your solar ignitions larger or grant you other effects. This can increase the number of explosions that happen around the battlefield. I tend to find that the fragments on Solar don't pair as well with Severance Enclosure as Void and Arc's fragments do. However, the Hammer works so well with it that it's still a very strong pick. For mods on Solar, I've chosen to go with Seeking Wells, Overcharge Wellmaker, Well of Ions, Well of Life, and Melee Wellmaker. This makes it so that my melee and my finisher both create wells. The Arc Wells that I'm making will give me benefits from Well of Ions, making my melee do more, and the Solar Wells that I'm making will let me get Well of Life, which will give me more healing on top of the healing I am already getting from sunspots. For Void, you have a few more options. While you need Offensive Bulwark to make your uncharged melee empowered, either Controlled Demolition or Bastion work incredibly well as your second aspect. If you're running Controlled Demolition, you're going to need a way to get overshields. Both Shield Bash and Shield Throw grant overshield when you hit. However, as these take your melee charge, it is a little bit finicky to keep up 24/7. For that reason, you can run Bastion, grant you better access to overshields, enabling more upkeep on the build. For that reason, I recommend Bastion for lower end content. However, at higher level content, I still recommend Controlled Demolition, as the volatile explosions pair so incredibly well with Severance Enclosure. No matter which aspect you go with, Echo of Expulsion is necessary. Causing more explosions makes this build even more potent, and makes this subclass arguably the strongest of the three for this build. If you end up going Controlled Demolition, Echo of Provision and Echo of Exchange can grant you a nice loop that'll grant you more access to your melee, as Echo of Provision will grant you more melee energy whenever you hit targets with grenades, and Echo of Exchange will then help you get your grenade energy back to throw out more grenades. Echo of Reprisal is just an incredibly strong fragment, especially on a melee build where you will often be surrounded by combatants, granting you super energy, and if you're running Controlled Demolition, could be an easy way to get your bubble up to grant you overshield to get the build started. Echo of Persistence is very useful, especially if you're on Controlled Demolition, to keep your overshield up for as long as possible. Due to offensive bulwark, your melee final blows will extend the duration of your overshield, which means that if you're running it with Controlled Demolition, getting an overshield and then punching targets and killing them will give you more overshield, which is the main gameplay loop of the Controlled Demolition build. However, taking Echo of Persistence can help keep it up longer while you're trying to find a target to melee. Echo of Leeching is also incredibly strong, as melee final blows will give you health regeneration for you and nearby allies. It also gives you 10 resil, which is just helpful in general. Echo of Obscurity is also incredibly helpful if you plan to be finishing targets a lot, especially in high-end content, as it gives you invisibility when you run up to finish targets. And finally, Echo of Starvation is incredibly useful depending on what build you do, as it can grant you Devour, which will help even more to keep you alive. For this build, I've chosen to go with Harmonic Siphon, Hands-On, Striking Light, Seeking Wells, Elemental Charge, Melee Wellmaker, and Well of Tenacity. This grants me Charge with Light whenever I melee something to death through Melee Wellmaker, Elemental Charge, and Seeking Wells. It also gives me damage resistance with Well of Tenacity. And then Striking Light is used in a similar way to the Arc build, where it'll grant all of your allies Orbs of Power, and also gives you the damage resistance while you're running. Hands-On's just useful when you're in the fray killing lots of things in order to get super energy, which is far more important on this build than on either of the other two. And Harmonic Siphon is used in order to grant yourself Orbs of Power to try and get Devour up. Another incredibly strong mod that you could choose to go with is Reactive Pulse, granting yourself a powerful overshield while performing your finisher. This can be used if you decide to go for the finishing aspects of Severance Enclosure rather than the melee end of it, making sure that in high-level content you stay alive. And that's it for the build. You have 3 different options using any of the light subclasses, and all 3 are incredibly strong in their own right. Personally, I like running this build with Void the most, however, Arc and Solar are both incredibly strong and fun as well. If you have any thoughts for this build or suggestions for future builds, please leave them down in the comments below. I'd love to see how you guys feel about this build, and also love to see what you guys are running on your end. Until next time, I've been Zadok Squared. Have fun, everyone.